Well, good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to Making Change Stick in Finance Transformations. My name's Charlotte Houston. I'm a director at inlumi, and together with my colleague Jan Mitchell, we're going to be your hosts for today's webinar. Just to say, we've got a chat function for the webinar, so if you do have any questions as we go through today's session, please do ask the questions in the chat and we will try to come to them either during the session or at the end of today's session. A little bit about me. So I've got a background of 20 years of finance transformation experience. I've led the change initiatives in a whole range of finance transformation programs, from ERP implementations to EPM technology implementations to large-scale operating model changes. So hopefully be able to share some of those experiences with you today. I'm delighted as well that we're going to be joined by 3 panelists in a panel session a bit later on today. We're really grateful to those individuals for coming along to share some of their experiences of making change stick in finance transformations, and we'll introduce them a little bit later on. So a little bit about inlumi for those of you that don't know us as a business. We are a finance consulting business headquartered in the UK and Netherlands. We're a team of about 250, and we specialise in technology-enabled transformation in finance. We offer services from the very outset of helping CFOs and finance leaders think about finance strategy and vision and operating model, through to having a backbone in the EPM technology space and helping organizations access better information and insight through tools like OneStream, Oracle, and Tagetic. And we also have a practice in process automation and data and analytics. So why does finance transformation still matter? And I thought it'd be interesting to share with you all the results of a survey that we did in 2023. When we were at the Gartner CFO conference, along with about 500 other finance leaders. And we asked a range of individuals at that conference, what are the priorities for you in finance transformation over the next couple of years? And what are the projects that you're going to be investing in that time horizon? And as you can see on the slide here, there were 3 things that really stood out to me that came up time and again for organizations and as really big focus areas. One is the need to take advantage of generative AI, of machine learning and automation, and really understanding what that can mean for finance, particularly in areas like predictive planning. The second one was the move to cloud, particularly the move to cloud ERPs. But in general, almost every client organization I'm working with has an objective to move off on-premise systems and move into the cloud. And finally, the expanding set of reporting requirements that finance is being expected to support. And these go well beyond the traditional remit of a finance function. So things like ESG, things like some of the new tax reporting, and the need for finance to play that orchestrator role in an organization and bringing together information across the business. If you take that into account together with the fact that there is an exploding amount of data in organizations, and senior business leaders outside of finance are demanding faster, better quality, richer data to be able to make decisions with. And it's often finance that the organization is looking to help them find a way to get value out of that data. And in addition, there's new operating models. COVID has completely changed the way that we all work. And what that means for finance and back office functions is often that hybrid working is the new norm, that there are more complex partnerships in how services are being delivered in organizations. And there's different expectations from your finance teams about how they would like to work. So all of that means that the pace of change for finance is only going to continue to increase and become more complex. At the same time, making change stick has got a lot harder. And there's tons of research that's being done in the last couple of years about why traditional change management just doesn't work anymore. I was reading just yesterday that the average attention span of people has shrunk over the last 20 years from 2.5 minutes to 45 seconds. And this was research done by Northeastern University. And they found that just the bombardment of different stimuli that we all have in our day-to-day lives has meant you have a really short window to actually grab somebody's interest to help them learn something new. And Forbes has done this really interesting article, and we'll send the link out to you all after the event, where they talk about some other reasons why traditional change management doesn't work. Things like the fact that we need to think about team behavioural change, not just individual behavioural change. And that when you're deploying change and training events and activities, you have to do it really close to the moment of the change now, partly because of that attention span point. In addition, the middle managers, who are often for a finance transformation, a really critical pool of individuals that we need to get on board with the change, are often the ones that are the most resistant. And there's a number of reasons for this. So often it's because they may not feel involved in the decision making that's happened above them about a change initiative. And they're unsure about what it means for their roles as more tools are empowered into their teams as well. But being able to find ways to access that group is increasingly important. But the opportunity and the benefit that you can get if you get this right is really clear. And I love this quote from IBM, where they say, for every dollar you invest in online training, you will see a return of $30 or more. So if we can find the right tools and the right ways to change behaviors and change cultures, actually the value you're going to get from all the significant investments of technology and otherwise is going to rocket. So we'd love then to hear a little bit from some of you about what challenges you've faced in trying to make change stick in finance transformations. So we're about to pop up on screen a poll, and you'll see in that poll a range of answers that you can give about some of the things that perhaps you may have seen that might have caused challenges in trying to make change stick in finance transformations. So hopefully that poll has popped up on your screens now. And if you'd like to just have a read and let us know what you think.
Yeah, that's great. Everyone can see the questions should be center of your sort of screen there. So some great challenges, I think, that people have kind of come across, and we've seen these in transformations that we've worked on, and things that can be overcome as long as they are acknowledged. So if you kind of pop your votes in, can choose your top three. There's quite a long a few to choose from there. It might be a difficult choice. Yeah, okay. So so actually the kind of interesting one that's coming up, some that are very close actually. Inconsistent leadership involvement is top at the moment, closely followed by stakeholder buy-in and engagement. And obviously stakeholders, leadership are part of stakeholders, but the stakeholder group goes an awful lot wider than that. So those two are now neck and neck, okay? So, and then following on from that, we've got the lack of communication, unclear objectives. So, really important, to establish the navigation for what we're trying to achieve beforehand. And siloed mindset, interesting, okay? A few things that I think some of us might have experienced. So great responses there, everyone. Good to see those. Thank you for voting.
Super. Well, we'll touch on some of those things as we go through the next section to hopefully share some ideas about how to tackle some of those challenges. So in inlumi, we think about change in 5 key components, and we think these are the 5 things that can really help you to make change stick in a complex finance transformation. The first of those is navigation. So have you got a really clear vision and goal and purpose for your project? Are the benefits clear and agreed by everybody? And do you understand how you're going to measure those benefits and show success when you get there? Secondly is leadership. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but leadership is such a vital part of making a successful change stick. Not just during the project, but well beyond the lifetime of the project. So finding the right leaders, not just the program sponsor, but the wider business leadership, understanding who those individuals are and how to support them is really key. Engagement, and thinking about how you're going to engage the wider user base. So often with some of these programs, particularly ERP or EPM technology, you've got a very significant volume of individuals who may only use a new system or a new process infrequently. So how are you going to win the hearts and minds of those users and keep them interested and engaged in the project? And then education, and thinking about how you're going to upskill those users, again, not just during the project, but how do you create a sustainable learning environment where it can continue on for new joiners and future users of your new system, process, or the new operating model well beyond the life of the project. And all of that needs to be wrapped around with really careful and well-planned communication at all levels and in a way that's going to be digestible to the audience. We wanted to just dive in then to a couple of those topics and just share some examples of things that we've seen work really well to help make change stick. The first of those is leadership. And we think that you need to think about leadership throughout the life cycle of the change that you're looking at, starting with the alignment of the vision. So have all your leadership got behind the same vision and can talk about it with the same couple of sentences. And then can you tie the program back to the core purpose of your organization and put it in a language that really resonates with your staff? And you can see we've got a picture of an airbag down on the left-hand side. And one story that I love to tell is one of our clients that we worked with, Autoliv, who's a leader in the car safety manufacturing space. And their EPM project started off with the CEO asking some questions that the organization was struggling to answer, like, should we make or buy our components? Which programs stay on track and stay on budget? And where should we invest, in the next manufacturing site? Some questions which the organization felt it couldn't answer. And that really became a source of commitment and resonance for the organization beyond the program as we went through the project, because we could keep coming back to how do we help the CEO and the senior leadership team better run the business by delivering this project and creating better information. And one of our panelists, I know, will talk a bit more about that later on. You've got to launch an awareness campaign and seed the change into everyday communications, from town halls at the outset of the project to everyday meetings. Make sure it's very visible and on the radar of everybody in the business. And then keeping the visibility of leadership commitment during the program is really important. I led an S4HANA implementation for one of the UK's largest utilities, and we were going to go live with this new system to 9,000 users on one day. So one of the things we decided to do was to get a little podcast interview with the CEO of the business and the program leader, and interview the CEO to ask, why is this project important? How does it help this business to move towards net zero in 2050? How does it help serve the underlying purpose and reason for being of this organization? And at one point we had over 1,000 people watching this podcast because they wanted to hear what the CEO said. So think about who those really senior influencers are and how you can make their commitment visible. Celebrate success as you go along the way. These programs are often quite long, so make sure you're keeping on celebrating the steps forwards that you've made. And finally, think about how you can help your leaders to role model business as usual. So one of the things that we do with clients sometimes is called white glove training, setting up a one-to-one with some of your senior new leaders who will be using a new tool, and give them personalized training so they feel confident to stand up in their next meeting and use the new dashboards or use the new ERP system to demonstrate why we should be using these new tools as opposed to going back to Excel or the old ways of working. And then thinking about engagement and that wider user base, the start of a program, think about who your influencers are. So change champions have been around for a while, but I think what we've learned is the people that might not be so obvious initially could often be your best influencers. So these are people who are well liked, who have a big social crowd at work, who people listen to. Find those influencers, even if they're not very technical individuals, and bring them into the project and into the change to help you be the voice of the project out in the organization. Make the change real by showing the change, not telling people about the change. So particularly with systems implementations, showing the new solution throughout the program so people understand what they're going to get, and there's no surprises when you get to the end of a project. Helps people to digest it as they go, rather than it being a shock at the end when they get to testing or training. Thinking about gamifying testing and training is a great way to engage audiences in a new way. And again, one of my clients, we actually ran a mini festival during a set of training that we rolled out. So we had different stages for the different topics of training that people could go along to. You would get badges for attending different training sets, and we made it a competition between different business units to see who could get to the most stages and complete the most training. And you'd be amazed as to how competitive people get and how much it can boost your attendance and completion of training. Explain what's in it for me. So how is my day-to-day life going to be different? And it can be really helpful to do that using a curve like this, using a day in the life storyboard to describe how new processes will work, not just in a factual way, but what does it mean for John in accounts? What does it mean for Sally in production? How will they interact with each other with the new processes or ways of working? Get constant and honest feedback about readiness and genuine concerns. It's much better to know how people are feeling, even if they get close to the end and have some irrational fears emerge. If you're forewarned, you're forearmed, and therefore you can do something about it. So make sure you've got the right mechanisms to get honest and frequent feedback about how ready people feel for change. And then celebrate success when you get there. And it's often such a big build up to go live. People forget sometimes to take that pause, celebrate the achievements that have been made and the commitment that everybody's put into it. So in summary, don't just think about process, data, tech, or roles, but think about the cultural change, the team mindset change that needs to happen to really embed a new way of working, and then the behavioural change that you want to see in the wider organisation, and spend as much time describing how those things need to be different as you do with the more technical aspects of a change. And then Jan, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about some of the latest thinking in education.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. And actually, thank you very much for sharing that nice comment from Manfred in the chat, saying that you gave some really great practical examples there, which is definitely because you've had lots of experience in this space. So thank you for that comment, Manfred. So what's I thought it'd be interesting actually to sort of start a little bit. We're talking about the latest in education, but this diagram a lot of you will be familiar with if you've been working in the learning space. And actually it's based on a piece of research that was done back in 1960, which is like kind of hard to believe. But actually, it's actually very, very illustrative of how people learn and what we need to think about when we're trying to engage people in a learning experience, particularly around where there's a system at the heart of it or process change and so on as well. So, I'm not going to go through all of these, but, I think the sort of stats they sort of show, getting 200 people in a kind of webinar with very little opportunity to interact is a passive method, and is not necessarily going to land well for a lot of the detail that's needed for people to be able to properly adopt the sort of systems. So in terms of our, so if we can go on to the next slide, please, Charlotte. Sorry. So really, kind of with that sort of mindset of like needing to make sure we give people the an opportunity to interact, to get hands-on, to learn, to question, and so on. It starts really with making sure, first of all, we consider everybody. So be inclusive. It's very easy to focus on just the people who've got the software licenses, okay, and the people who've been using the current system. But really think about that wider group and make sure you consider everybody who's impacted. And at that point, while you're kind of building that stakeholder group, think about their, things like where they're located, what their cultural differences are, their kind of, language requirements. I hear all the time, English is our business language. Okay, full stop. English is our business language does not necessarily mean that all of your users are going to feel comfortable receiving training in English. So for countries like Latin America, for mainland China, sometimes you will get much better results if you take the effort to do some localization of training materials so that those people can have training in their native language, the opportunity to ask questions there, that training intervention will land much more with much more success by sort of considering the kind of cultural impact from that area. So, those targeted sort of, coming onto the learning journey, it's a balance of needing to train people just before go live of when we're thinking about system transformation, because of the kind of the attention span and so on that Charlotte referred to earlier, but also trying to do some kind of warm-up activities before that, so to build that familiarization, to give them that all of those aspects of the kind of the vision of where they're going, the benefits of what we're doing. So there is obviously the system element where people need to understand how to navigate in a system, but really they need to be open to why they are doing that and the benefits of that before they ever go into that targeted sort of more sort of system focused training event. And how do you open them up to those possibilities, to those benefits that they're going to see from this, or that the organization is going to see? You don't just do it by email. Just throwing email at people is not going to work. Video is great, short interactive videos, familiarization to build up, and then keep the actual sort of more detailed sort of training quite sort of as close to the sort of time when people will be hands-on to the system as possible. Okay, and then think about sustainability. So often people will design their training and it's all focused on go live, all focused on that. You do your testing, you do your training before go live, and it's then like, oh, okay, well, what now? Well, we need to be thinking about the what now, about the business as usual for each right from the beginning. So building in sustainability means thinking about what information is going to have what I would call a long shelf life. Okay, so it's not really going to change. Which information is going to be more likely to change, short shelf life. That kind of approach, that sort of type of thought around sustainability can help you decide what effort and what resources you put into designing those learning sort of interventions, and how agile you make your solution. But I would say that really this area in sustainability, digital is a must, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about digital in a moment. And then two kind of key things at the end, really. Empathy. Okay. We need to, as leaders of the change, of designing the sort of the change journey, we need to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of the users, no matter where they are located, and think about the change from their perspective. So what's happening for them? This might be the most important project to us, but to them, it's only one of 6 or 7 different projects that they've got going on. So let's be respectful of that. Let's have empathy for their schedules, their holidays, the other demands on their time. And if we demonstrate that empathy in our dealings with them, then I think we get a much better relationship, a much better commitment from those users. And then the final one, make it fun. And Charlotte, you touched on some great examples of how fun can be had. Fun and finance, sometimes they're not always words that you hear in the same sentence, but it is possible. Okay, so then in terms of digital learning, then, so I said this is a must, not a choice. It's a must because it's the way that Gen Z learns, and probably most of your teams are Gen Zers are coming up from that as your recruitment pool at the moment. 24/7 for a global audience, and has other advantages there, for replay and so on. So I'm just going to quickly flip into a share to sort of share my screen just to show you a couple of examples of digital content, where this is e-learning, and I sometimes hear people say, "Oh, e-learning's old news." I don't believe it is old news. I believe e-learning has a very much a kind of a cornerstone to a digital strategy, but needs to be used in quite an agile way, and a way that gives people choice over the way that they learn. So this is an example from OneStream, but it could be any system, any technology implementation. So we have a list of different topics. People can choose, if they're a new user, they can choose to navigate all the way through beginning to end. If they're an existing user, or they want to just do a refresh or just kind of jump in, they can jump into a particular topic. And every topic, sort of starts with some basic sort of steps, a bit of theory, a bit of context, straight away into interacting with the screen, explaining what's going on, giving people the chance to interact and read at their own pace. And then, because it's a system, we have to do a demonstration. We have to show people what's in the application for them to look at. And then you can see very short 2.5-minute videos. So these videos here are able to be shown within a kind of a flow, a sort of theory flow for a new user, but also served out as individual videos, either in the OneStream interface or via SharePoint or through links in email, to give people reminders of particular areas. And every topic here got quick interactions again, and also let people check their understanding. Learning a new system can have an element of fear with it. People are in their comfort zone with the old system. Let's help them reinforce the fact and build their confidence that yes, they do understand what the new system is going to do. Get them to check some understanding and so on as we go through there. Okay, so there's just a couple of ideas, very, very quick. So handing back to you there, sort of, Charlotte, I think we're going to go to a poll.
Thank you, Jan. Yes, we are. So I'm just going to pop this back up on screen, and we'd love to hear what you think again. So now we've told you a few ideas of things that we've seen to drive success in a finance transformation. We'd love to hear what you think are the success factors that you've seen work well in other programs that you've been involved in. So if we can pop the poll up on screen again, if you click, I think we've suggested your top 3 answers to the question, and we'd love to see what your views are on what can make change stick.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. So so there's some good things here that we've touched on. So fun, things like gamification, the strong leadership, benefits, vision and benefits, and so on. So let's have a look how those are coming up. So okay, so very key straight away there, the leadership was right at the top. Okay, so I think that's a very definite sort of theme. Change champions, that's kind of great, and enthusiastic change champions as well. I would agree with that. And then coming in from there, I guess some innovative communication, clear vision and benefits linked to a strong purpose. Okay, so I think these things very much cornerstones of any transformation. So it's great to see that our experience is being echoed out in the field there. So fabulous leadership all the way.
Indeed. Thanks, Jan. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. So I'm really excited now then to introduce our panelists to you. Pippa, Martin and Claudia, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to ask each of you to share some of your own experiences as to what has driven success in a finance transformation. So Pippa, if I might start with you, if perhaps you do a very quick intro, and then I'd love to hear one example maybe of a successful finance transformation you've seen, and what do you think it was that drove that success?
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, I'm Pippa Sands. I started off my career in a traditional finance environment, largely in the media and advertising industry, and then transitioned into finance transformation about 10 years ago. Thoroughly enjoying it. Every day is different, so really rising to the challenge. And in terms of most successful change program I've been involved in, I think I'd revert to a very traditional PLC that I was recruited by, and the board had a vision that the Excel-based year-end consolidation, which had been used very successfully for the last 20 years, was on its last legs. They'd grown very quickly through acquisition, and it was very clear we needed a new tool. And right from the outset, I could see there was potential resistance perhaps from the FD side, even though we had board engagement. So really it was very clear to me that I needed to bring them on the journey from the outset, both in the selection process, keeping them up to date and finding every window of opportunity to communicate to them, to keep them in touch with the implementation progress. And I also went for a sort of a two-tiered approach and got underneath of the bonnet of all their finance departments, very decentralized organisation, not only sort of the financial controller, but the finance manager, but also the other members of the finance department that the change would impact, i.e. stripping it right back to the purchase ledger staff, the sale, the credit control, and really getting them engaged, and they assisted then with joining the change community, which I set up, helping with the data transfer, and then keeping that momentum going with the promise of, look, once we have this first phase in, we can assist you with your business reporting challenges. And indeed, I honoured that. I went in with a face-to-face training for each of the subsidiaries with the FD and brought that sort of community together. And with that, we were able to drive out further phases of the programme when we were launched into the management accounting, FP&A piece, and also budgeting and strategic planning.
Super, thank you, Pippa, and I love your point about the two-tier approach. If I ask you if you have one piece of advice to give the audience on this webinar, if they're setting out or thinking about a finance change, what would that bit of advice be?
I'd say know your culture and adapt the change to support, adapt your approach to support the change. I've just mentioned about the PLC I was working in, and then consequently I was working in a polycentric global legal organisation. All had their own different visions of what that change should be. I'm currently working in an organisation where very young audience, engaged audience, and really positive change, and we've got a change community that we're working with who are there's positivity rippling through both at the top level of the organisation, but also at the more junior staff who are keen to learn and develop as a result from us implementing this new tool. So definitely know your culture and adapt to change.
Love that, thank you, and definitely resonates with me, I think, in putting change into the language of your business. So then I'm delighted to introduce Martin, our next panelist. Again, Martin, if you don't mind doing a quick introduction to yourself, and then would love to hear your experience of a successful change project and what drove that success for you.
Well, thank you. I've been in change management for about 20 odd years. My background actually is I'm a CIMA qualified accountant, but decided that my future lies in communication and change. The last program I worked on, I'm still actually working on as well, part-time, is a big finance transformation in a large automotive based in Sweden. And I think that for me, when I first joined, there was such challenges in terms of the finance transformation overall. You're talking about 4 different time zones, 4 major areas, and at the same time they were doing they were moving people into shared service centres and centralising a lot of their finance transformation. At the same time, doing a very complex ERP implementation of OneStream, which we're working with inlumi for, and sometimes it looked like we were running different change programs at the same time. So I think actually for me, I had to sort of press the stop button, the pause, and said, look, what we've got to do is we've got to set out a strategy, we've got to set out a vision, and also create a program that looks like it's one joined up finance transformation. And I think that was hard. I think it was hard for people to hear that, particularly when you've got 3 different project managers or 3 different sponsors who probably want their own airtime, right? And it just didn't make sense to me. So I worked with people. It was difficult at the start. I think it did take a few months for me to convince people that my vision was the right thing to do. But once we did that, and I went to talk to people through what the strategy should be, it was much more simple. And getting the CFO on board, the senior person on board, talking about this is one joined up transformation actually really helped push this forward. And this is why it's so important to get your senior sponsors online, visible, talking talk, all the kind of cliches that you would expect, but it means a big difference. And I was kind of reflecting on what was said before, not just the CFO, but also the CEO. So I created these sort of sets of digital summits. They are quite long sessions where it's not just show and tell, it's also celebrating success, bringing outsiders to talk about what it's like in their organization, but also bringing the CEO to talk to the CFO, really inspire people, I think. And I think sort of one takeaway success of this is that we did have a vision, one joined that vision, and I think there was a lot more cooperation within the units than there had been before. I mean, this is a complicated change. I'm losing my voice, by the way, so I'll take a short break and some water, but you can ask another question, Charlotte, sorry.
Please do, Martin, thank you. And I think your point about joining up the change programs goes back to what Jan was talking about, putting yourself in the shoes of the user, because from their point of view, they're being bombarded by all these different changes. So it's really important, I think, to do that step back and help understand all the range of changes that are happening, not just perhaps the one that you might be involved in. Thanks, Martin. And again, one piece of advice, I guess, you would give anybody in the audience setting out on a change project, what would be that one thing to think about?
Well, it's communication. I cannot underestimate the importance of communicating, and do it through an omni-channel approach, whether it's in face-to-face, and obviously you can't do face-to-face in the global necessarily, but face-to-face, Yammer, Viva Engage, newsletters, even that's since the old school, right? And webinars or whatever. You have to keep communicating, because people will lose interest unless you do that.
Super, thank you, Martin. I hope you have not killed your voice.
No, I'm all right, thank you.
Super, thanks. And then finally, Claudia, delighted to have you on the panel as well. Same question to you, please. A little bit of introduction about yourself, and then we'd love to hear one of your experiences of a successful change and what drove that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Claudia Schlesinger. I've been in change probably the last 10, 12 years. However, my background isn't finance, it's HR. So it is a different view and look at people, and I've sat on 3 or 4 finance transformations with teams of 150 people and been the only HR person to have a conversation and really look from a people perspective to understand what do these actual changes mean. I think for me, sort of some of the key challenges and sort of to measure them is, are we ensuring that once we've put the change in place, those individuals are actually challenging themselves in the new ways of working? And I think both my colleagues have sort of touched on the ways to do it. It is that communication, it is senior engagement and leadership. I think one of the challenges with leadership is obviously to do with more than a multiple sort of vision, and the drive when you've got multiple geographies and multiple teams fighting for the same space, budget, scope and capability. They still have to streamline. We still need one vision and one drive to ensure that it's being made for the right reasons. And I think if we can get the individuals that participate in those change activities to challenge themselves, we then know they're looking at new ways of working and they really sort of immerse themselves in how they can actually adopt, then we can start actually see the change happen. And I think sort of probably one of my last completed experiences as I'm currently in a program was sort of a very large bank across 18 geographies. Every country had a different setup from a finance perspective, obviously the local governance and compliance. And to my surprise, being a global bank, they weren't on the same page. So putting in an ERP for them ensured that they had sort of line of sight, visibility of actual live reporting, and everybody had to start considering doing ways the same. But the biggest challenge there is then culture. And ultimately, we can all say we want, for example, to put in place the same level of service across a global activity. However, every culture has a different expectation of what does good look like. So that becomes a key part. Otherwise, you end up spending too much money to try and achieve a global KPI or delivery from a service perspective, where actually within country, it fits. So again, it's just being mindful of the culture. It's being mindful of a global vision, but being able to tailor it locally to support the local needs.
Love that, thank you. And I think ties back to some of what Jan was saying again around language and culture and sensitive to your user base and where they are. One bit of advice, Claudia, that you would give to anybody on the call, sort of setting out on their own program?
I would say if it's sort of multi-businesses or multi-country involvement, ensure you have streamlined, strong sponsorship and vision.
Thank you. Well, look, thank you all. I think we'd love to carry on and I could talk for hours with you all about your experiences, but I'm conscious that we have a couple of minutes left. So a big thank you to the three of you for joining our panel today and for sharing your experiences. And perhaps if I wrap up today's conversation by bringing it back to the 5 elements that I think we talked about at the outset, and to your point, Claudia, around leadership and the importance of having clarity of vision and strong sponsorship, I think that is, and it's come up in the polls as well, it is absolutely vital to the success of any program. So really do think about who those key leaders are and how you're going to empower them and support them to sponsor your programs. I think clarity of vision and bringing together the vision, as Martin talked about, perhaps across programs if you've got competing change initiatives. So think about that from the perspective of your user base. Engagement, and I think to Pippa's point about know your culture, put change into the language of your organisation, make it feel relevant to the core of your business, and you're much more likely to get a good reaction from individuals. And be sensitive to how it feels for them and what language or culture they work in themselves to make sure you're tailoring communication and change to that audience. And think about education and some of the ideas that Jan shared about ways to structure digital learning to be relevant for the Gen Z audiences that you are no doubt communicating to. And finally, as Martin talked about, I think communicate. It will just continue to be the most important wrapper around a change program to make sure everybody's really taken on board the messages that you're sharing. So that's it for today. It's flown by. I could have gone on for a lot longer. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and we will send out a pack of some information to everybody who's attended today. We'll try and put in some links to some of those articles that I talked about. And do let Jan or I know if you would like to explore any of the topics that we talked about today in a bit more detail. So thank you all for joining and have a great day.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for all the people contributing in the chat. There's been some great questions there. So, and good food for thought from everyone, from our panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.